It's good that you get a little bit of exercise on Christmas Eve, right? A few ups and downs won't hurt when you're eating turkey dinner tomorrow. I can think a few statements more appropriate for the Christmas season than the one we've just sung. A few statements that summarize the whole thing as perfectly and as succinctly as that: joy to the world because the Lord has come. But as I think of the Christmas story, I can't help but think that really isn't how it started. We've read parts of it already in that same region, same area as Bethlehem. There were shepherds keeping watch over their flocks at night, presumably minding their own business, enjoying a nice, quiet, calm, dark evening. Maybe already drifting off into that half asleep, half awake, one eye on the sheep, one eye catching a few winks moments, when suddenly everything changed. And we're told the result of everything changed. They were filled with fear. In other words, they experienced a fear they had never even imagined possible. There was nothing left but fear. It's very different than the joy to the world, the Lord has come part of the song. There's a group of shepherds filled with fear is how the Christmas story really begins. I don't know about you when you think of that. Maybe it sounds a little bit odd. It sounds almost inappropriate. Like that's the piece of the story that doesn't seem to fit. That's not how the story should begin, but there it is, staring at us in Luke chapter 2. A group of shepherds, terrified. And that's the moment I want you to consider with me just for a few moments this evening. Now, I think to consider it, I want to compare it with another scene that helps me at least start to unpack what's going on in Luke chapter 2. A different scene, a totally different scene, but in a couple ways similar. Imagine for a moment, maybe it's not hard for you, depending on how old you are. Imagine you're in bed at night. You're lying there, maybe you're 6 or 7 or 5, when you hear a noise in the closet. And you are filled with fear. Now you do what anyone does when you're 5 or 6 or 7. You yell out at the top of your lungs, "Mommy or Daddy, come quick." And as long as this isn't like the 100th time this has happened, probably a mom or dad comes down the hall and says, "What is it?" And you say, "There is something in the closet." Now, if it's a compassionate mother or father, here's what they do. They open up the closet, they look in, they say, "It's all right, I've checked, there's nothing there. And not only that, I'll leave the door open just a crack and I'll turn the hall light on." Right? And it resolves the fear. Those words, those actions address that kind of fear. And now, you can put your head back on the pillow and go to sleep. But if mom and dad showed up to the door and opened it up and the little child said again, "There's a sound coming from my closet," and mom or dad said something like this, "Don't worry, we locked the car and turned off the TV." You would rightly say, "Well, hold on a second. That action and those words do nothing to resolve the fear in my heart. There's still a sound in the closet. What does the car and the TV have to do with the fear I'm going through?" And you'd be right. It has nothing to do with it, and it has no cure for it. And as we come to the Christmas story, something very odd happens. This group of shepherds filled with fear are met by an angel who announces good news, meant to cure fear. In fact, the angel tells them that. He says, "Fear not, for behold," in other words, "Look, I'm about to tell you something that if you understood would resolve the fear that's in your heart." And then the angel goes on and delivers this message. Tonight, in the town of David, a Savior has been born. He is Christ the Lord. Now, I don't know about you, but if you think about the story for a moment, that's not what I expect the angel to say. I expect the angel to say, "Fear not, I haven't come to hurt you." Or, "Fear not, look, I have no weapons in my hand. There's nothing about me to fear." Because that would seem to be the kind of information, the kind of actions that would resolve the fear of shepherds on a hillside if what they're truly afraid of is the angel. But are you starting to realize that the fear had nothing to do with an angel that night? In fact, it's interesting. If you go through all the scriptures, 76 times, I checked, the word angel shows up in a verse. And only 3 times the word fear accompanies it. 2 of them are in the Christmas story. Once has nothing to do with the angel at all. That's Joseph, who's just afraid to take Mary as his wife. His fear isn't about an angel. It's about the implications of marrying a woman who's with child, and imagine what people are going to say and what life's going to look like. This is one of the only other times. What I want to suggest to you is the shepherds had no fear of an angel. That wasn't their fear. Because there's one other critical little piece in the story that we're told. The glory of the Lord shone around. That was the moment of the fear. Not an angelic being, as unusual, as odd as that must have been. They knew in that precise moment, none other than God himself stood on a hillside. And see, they knew intuitively what everyone has known throughout human history. When God shows up and he's perfect and we're not, there's a problem. There's a danger. And the danger, strangely enough, is actually God. Because he's perfect and holy and sinless. There is nothing broken or wrong in him, and there is in us. All of a sudden, the news of the angels makes sense, doesn't it? Fear not, the presence of God. Because I've got something important to tell you. This very night, God has done something to solve the problem of a broken humanity approaching a holy God. As Pastor Richard said earlier, he sent his only Son to save us, to deliver us from a very real danger. Now, I want to just encourage you to think of 3 parts of this story. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. The first part is this, that the good news is good news because it's true. I mean, if it's not true news, it's not good news. If I came to you tonight and said, hey, good news, you've inherited $1 million. And you said, really? And I said, no. Well, hold on a second. If it's not true, that's not good. But there's all sorts of people who approach the story of the birth of Jesus Christ, the celebration of Christmas, and they say it's nothing more than a myth or a legend or a nice story we tell our kids. I have good news for you. The story is true. In fact, everything Luke records, he tells us, is to show us the truth of this story. And did you know that some of the greatest minds of human history have weighed this story in the balance and said, we are utterly convinced it's true? You just go through the list of some of the greatest artists and authors. You'll find almost every one of them fully convinced of the truth of the story. You go through the list of some of the greatest scientists, both dead and living to this day. Many of them, maybe even most of the greatest names, if I was to read through the list of great names of Einsteins and Galileos and Pasteurs and Newtons, fully convinced that this is true. It's good news because it's true news. It's also good news for another reason. It's good news because it's true news about Christ, who is Lord. That's the heart of the announcement. It's the introduction of a person. We know him as Jesus, but we know him by his titles as well. The Christ. The one sent by God. Chosen, sent, commissioned to save people from their sins. He is Christ the Lord. In other words, he is God himself. It's the same word Luke uses before and after the Christmas story to actually speak to us about God. He uses the same title of Jesus. This little baby in a manger who saves us is God. Lastly, it's good news because it's for all people. Remember that moment? The shepherds are told, today in the town of David, this child has been born. And they go on in the little story, and it will be a great joy for all the people, not just for shepherds on a hillside, not even just for everyone alive at the time Jesus is born, But this is good news for every human who has ever drawn a breath, no matter the nation, the language, the country, the era. It's good news for you. Many years ago, during the Depression, a story is told of a little boy who was poor. The circus was coming to town, and he was so excited. All he wanted to do was get to go to the circus. And the ticket price to go to the circus was $1, and he went to his dad and said, "Dad, could you buy me a ticket?" His dad said, "We don't have an extra $1 to spend on a circus. But if you were to work hard over the next number of weeks and save up your pennies, you might be able to earn enough to get a ticket." And so the boy went to work. He found every spare little job he could find. He gathered his coins, and one day as he counted them up for the 50th time, they finally added up to $1. And he rushed down to the general store, bought himself a ticket, because he was going to the circus. The day came. He was so excited. He could barely contain it. He grabbed his ticket, and he knew it was the day because the posters were up on all the walls. And he rushed down to Main Street and watched as the circus arrived. They arrived with their trucks with the nice brightly painted signs on the side. He watched the animals come in the cages. He watched the clowns parade down the street. And as one clown came by, he gave him his ticket because he thought he was at the circus. And after everyone went by, he excitedly went home and told his parents of the amazing time he had at the circus. His dad had started to clue in that something wasn't quite right. He was home much too early to have seen the circus. So he started to ask his son, "Well, where did you sit in the tent?" From the look on his little boy's face, he knew full well. His son had watched the parade. He had missed the circus. There's all sorts of people who will put up a tree and they will sing carols. They'll exchange gifts. In other words, they'll see the parade of Christmas. Some of the neat features, some of the things we do that we enjoy that are perfectly fine. But they miss the whole point. They miss the point that God became flesh and actually dwelt among us and saved us from sin. And here's my hope and prayer for us gathered in this room tonight, that none of us would miss the main event. Enjoy the parade. Don't miss the circus. You know what I mean? Enjoy the event of Christmas, but don't miss Christ. It's our last candle, maybe the most important one. The one at the center of everything is the candle called the Christ candle that reminds us that Jesus Christ is the light of the world. I'm going to light our last one, and then I think I've got some help to light a whole bunch of candles as we sing a final song together called Silent Night. Seems a fitting one on a Christmas Eve that we sing together and worship Jesus Christ, our King.